Good morning, everyone. We're Group 5. Today, we are going to present a comparative study of poverty reduction strategies in Malaysia and China. Poverty reduction has long been important for all economies. Over the past 3 decades, the global extreme poverty rate fell from 38% in 1990 to 8.5% in 2024. However, this progress has slowed down in recent years, especially after the shock of COVID-19 pandemic. If current trends continue, it is predicted that about 7.3% of the global population will still remain in extreme poverty by 2030, far above the World Bank's target of below 3%. Therefore, it is necessary to examine countries that have made strong progress in reducing poverty. Malaysia and China are two successful examples, although they have followed different pathways. Under the World Bank's international poverty line of $3 per day, Malaysia's poverty rate declined from 6.66% in 1984 to almost zero in 2021. China's poverty rate under the same poverty line declined from 83.11% in 1990 to zero in 2022. However, eliminating extreme poverty does not mean that all problems have been solved. Under the higher poverty line of $8.3, Malaysia's poverty rate was 2.9% in 2021, while China's was 21.62%. Malaysia's Gini index was 40.7 in 2021, indicating a moderately high level of inequality. China's Gini index was lower at 35.7, but it still reflected a moderate level of inequality. Therefore, it is necessary to compare the poverty reduction strategies of Malaysia and China so as to draw lessons from their experiences and provide useful suggestions for future poverty reduction. Existing studies usually examine Malaysia and China separately, while limited research compares them within the same framework. To fill this gap, this study examines the main mechanisms, policy instruments, effectiveness and limitations of poverty reduction strategies in Malaysia and China. In terms of methodology, this study adopts a qualitative comparative approach. The specific methods include document analysis and descriptive statistical analysis. The study mainly uses secondary sources, including journal articles, policy documents, official reports, and data from the World Bank.
Hi, I'm Gao Zikun. Now I will present the literature review part of our study. Recent studies introduce poverty is not only about low income. It's also related to inequality, vulnerability, regional imbalance, and unequal access to development opportunities. The World Bank and Development Research Center explains that successful poverty reduction depends on both economic transformation and effective public policy. In general, poverty can be reduced through 3 main ways: economic growth, redistribution, and social policy, and targeted poverty alleviation. Recent literature also shows a shift from absolute poverty to relative poverty. This means that even after extreme poverty is reduced, countries still need to address inequality and regional disparities. Next, these ideas can be applied to the cases of Malaysia and China. For Malaysia, recent studies focuses on inclusive development, multidimensional poverty, regional inequality, and policy implementation. Kazna Research Institute points out that poverty in Malaysia should not only be measured by income, because regional and household differences are important. Isidala Joseph Chin also argues that Malaysia's poverty reduction success may hide regional gaps, especially between Peninsular Malaysia and East Malaysia. For China, the literature focuses more on targeted poverty alleviation, state capacity, and relative policy. China's poverty reduction was supported by economic reform, industrialization, urbanization, migration, and infrastructure development. However, studies also show that after eliminating extreme poverty, China still faces relative policy, income inequality, and urban-rural disparities. This shows that both countries reduces poverty, but through different policy approaches. Overall, both Malaysia and China show that economic growth is important, but it's not enough. Government intervention is also necessary to improve public services, create opportunities, and protect vulnerable groups. However, their strategies are different. Malaysia focuses more on inclusive development, redistribution, regional development, and social policies. China focuses more on rapid economic transformation, strong state intervention, and targeted poverty alleviation. The main research gap is that most studies examine Malaysia and China separately. There is limited comparative research using the same analytical framework. Therefore, this study compares both countries through three aspects: poverty reduction mechanisms, policy tools, and implementation, and the effectiveness and limitations of their strategies.
Hello everyone, this slide compares the poverty reduction pathway adopted by Malaysia and China. Malaysia aims to reduce poverty through economic growth, redistribution policies, and social development under the new economic policies and the later development plans. China followed a different path. After the reform on the opening up policies in 1978, rapid economic growth reduced poverty significantly. Later, China introduced target poverty alleviation in 2013 and rural ruralization strategy in 2018. Overall, Malaysia focused on broad economic development, while China emphasized government lead and target poverty reduction. Now, let's look at the key difference in implementations. Malaysia adopts a development-oriented approach by promoting economic growth, employment, education, and social welfare. China adopts a government-led approach by directing identified poor households and providing target assistance. The target group also differ. Malaysia focuses on rural communities and low-income households, while China focuses on regional poor households and underdeveloped rural areas. Overall, Malaysia emphasizes broad-based development, wherever China emphasizes precision and target government.
Okay, next I will compare the poverty reduction policy instruments used in Malaysia and China. First, in financial instruments, Malaysia mainly uses Islamic finance, such as zakat and waqf. These tools help redistribute wealth to poor people. Malaysia also uses microfinance, such as AIM, to give small loans to low-income households. China uses poverty alleviation microloans, rural credit cooperatives, and digital inclusive finance. These tools are closely linked to the government's poverty identification system. Second, in social assistance, Malaysia uses STR, which gives cash support to low-income groups. China mainly uses the DBO system, which provides basic living support for poor households based on local poverty lines. Regarding lands and relocation, Malaysia's FELDA program resettles poor farmers onto new land to grow cash crops. China moves people from harsh living conditions to better areas and builds industrial parks nearby to create jobs. In education, Malaysia set up residential schools and quotas for Bumiputera students and more focuses on Bumiputera and rural students, while China focuses on compulsory education for poor children, waiving fees, and improving rural school facilities. Finally, Malaysia uses the EPPE3043 database, and China uses a household-by-household registration system with official assigned to each poor family. And China is more advanced in using e-commerce for poverty reduction, especially through Taobao villages, while Malaysia is still in the early stages of digital poverty alleviation. Overall, Malaysia's tools are broader and more community-based, while China's tools are more targeted and government-led. Thank you.
This part compares the poverty reduction outcomes of Malaysia and China under the World Bank poverty lines of $3 and $8.3 per day. and the $3 poverty line. Both countries achieved remarkable success in reducing extreme poverty. Malaysia's poverty rate decreased from 5.23% in 1995 to only 0.01% in 2021, while China's poverty rate fell from 62.62% in 1995 to 0 in 2021. This shows that both countries have largely eliminated extreme poverty. And the higher $8.3 poverty line. Poverty rate also declined significantly. Malaysia's poverty rate dropped from 38.58% to 2.87%, while China's rate decreased from 96.48% to 20.62%. Although both countries made sustainable progress, China's relative poverty rate remains higher, indicating that improving living standards is still an important challenge. Although poverty has been greatly reduced, income inequality still exists in both countries. Malaysia's Gini index decreased to about 41%, while China's fell to around 36% in 2021, showing improvements in income distribution. However, regional development gaps remain a challenge. Therefore, both countries need to continue improve social welfare system and promoting more balanced and inclusive development. Malaysia adopted a development-oriented model that emphasizes social participation and welfare support. It helps strengthen social cohesion, but its targeting ability relatively limited. In construct, China uses government-led target poverty alleviation model. It is highly effective in identifying and assisting poor households, but it relies heavily on government resources. Overall, both countries have achieved significant poverty reduction, but through different approaches with their own strengths and challenges.
To conclude, both Malaysia and China have achieved significant success in reducing poverty and improved living standards. However, they adopt different strategies. Malaysia relies more on economic growth and redistribution, while China relies more on targeted poverty alleviation and rural revitalization. Despite this achievement, regional development disparities remain a challenge in both countries. Therefore, future efforts should focus on income equality, balanced regional development, and inclusive growth. References for this presentation are listed on the screen. That's all. Thank you for your listening.